Okay, I'm going to get started. Welcome, and I'd like to call the meeting of the ANWSD MAUSD Merger Study Committee to order on December 21st. And did everybody have a chance to look over the agenda? So we need a motion to adopt it.
So moved.
Second, Mary Kate.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, is there any discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
aye. Raise your
Aye.
hand. All those opposed?
Aye.
Did somebody say oppose it? No.
I think that was the delay.
No, I said aye. I think it was delayed.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Did you all have a chance to read over the minutes of the December 6th, 2021 meeting? So we need a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Second,
Excellent. We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of the December 6th meeting. Is there any discussion? Without any discussion, all those in favor, aye, or thumbs up, maybe?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Okay, the first order of official business is updates on the work plan. And it was added in our agenda, and Tracy will talk a little about that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's good to see your faces. Just briefly wanted to let you know that I added a few updates to the work plan. They're mostly listed as bullets at the end. They're articles that you may want to consider at some point in time. It's nothing you need to attend to or decide tonight. I just wanted to make sure that it was on your radar and that it stayed on my radar so I wouldn't forget it. And those articles or issues, first of all, you need to think about considerations for selecting a name, and you'll have a brief opportunity to talk about that tonight. But I also added perhaps considering including your preference to operate as a supervisory district in your articles, which would be advisory to the State Board of Education, and an opportunity to express your preference with the support of the electorate if they vote to approve the articles you actually ultimately create. And we can talk more about that later if desired. You could do an article that specifies the school students attend in the first year or few years of operations. And you could also add an article to explicitly address community involvement. So again, nothing to do tonight, just wanted those on the radar so that I don't forget them, but you know that there are options for you to consider as well. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the community feedback review, discussion and sharing. Everybody had there were 7 people that were going to report a brief summary of the main points. And I don't know who wants to start. So we're going over the community feedback review.
I'm happy to start.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just go back to what the question was I had. If ANWSD and MAUSD are merged, what successful outcomes do you hope for? Overwhelmingly, the response was programming related successful or program relating aspects, including things like being able to have more languages, or at least not cut, more electives, extracurricular activity opportunities, support for struggling students, and academic intervention plans. These were somewhat also tailored with discussion about transportation and how that may impact equity for particularly after school activities. Arts and theater and music were also included on there in terms of other programming and activities. The next aspect that there was a large number of people that discussed was cost savings, or at least slowing down rising costs. And connected to this was also consolidation of administrative staff, more effective administrative staff, efficient administration without duplication. After those three, most of them were a couple of people for each, other areas that people thought would be successful outcomes from the merger.
All right, thank you. Somebody else. Okay, Erica?
So my question was, as a community member, what would you notice about a school that's providing an equitable education for all students? So this is related. And basically, there were people answered the question in a couple of different ways. There was a theme of access. So access to different things, but for students to have access to all different levels of academics. So a lot of people wrote about, meeting the students where they're at. And also access to the same opportunities across the whole district. So from different schools. Access to emotional and behavioral supports in the school, and also to extracurriculars, sports and drama, art, those kinds of things as well, sort of enrichment type things. So that was, people were concerned that all the students would have the ability to access these things regardless of how far away they lived, or what their educational level was at. And then there was a question of access for teachers to training opportunities and also to support. There was a lot of call for just more support in the schools for all the students. And for teachers to be able to use their expertise in helping each student learn how they need to learn. And then for parents, there was another theme of open communication between parents and the school board, and between parents and teachers, and also between parents and students. That was mentioned a couple times. And then there were a few other themes having to do with what is success. So some people were looking at that, success part of the question. And so some people were saying, a good sign of equity would be if all students were able to go to college, or if all students were able to pursue whatever they want to after they're done with high school. Another sign of success that many people pointed to was just students and teachers feeling safe in the schools, but also feeling happy. So students who are happy to be in school, and teachers who are happy to be in school would be a good sign for people that things were equitable. And then there were a couple of people who said, this question is not a good question, and I don't believe in equity because what that really means is dragging everybody down to the lowest common denominator. So that was something that was voiced by maybe 2 or 3 people also.
Thank you, Erica. We should have a couple more people. Mary?
Yes, I had the quality education question. What would you like to see continue? My question was broken down basically into 3 parts. There was staff, programming, and small schools. And some of the responses had an overlap between one or more of them, but a lot of people voiced that they were really happy with the quality of staff and the relationships between the teachers and the students, and how the smaller schools really enabled the students and the teachers to have close relationships. A lot of them felt that particularly the music and the sports at our schools were great. And they wanted to see the level of programming that was here continue and improve. That was even in the quality one. And there was a lot of people who were very passionate about their small schools and the quality of education that was provided in that small setting. And then there was the few who didn't think we provided a quality education. So it basically came down to that. A lot of people, it was the staffing was great at the small schools. The quality of education was great because the programming was good because we had small ratios, things like that. There was a lot of overlap and interplay between those 3 main portions.
Thank you, Mary. Who else?
I had, well, Dave and I had, what does local mean? I left my notes in the envelope that I left, but I did go back through it before the meeting and sort of reminded myself what we wrote down. So I looked for sort of themes that emerged in the responses. One big theme was just around proximity and geography. You know, a lot of people just talked about within a reasonable distance is local. And there was also generally people wrote how it can vary by age, and it seemed, you know, younger students should be closer to home. And it's more acceptable for you know, high school age older students to go a little longer distance for their school, but nobody seems to want to see them on a bus for more than an hour. Another theme that I saw emerge was just on you know, connection to the community and relationships. Local school, there's close relationships. Everybody knows everybody. It's neighborly. There's a strong connection to the community the school's in. And another theme was just around control. You know, local schools being controlled autonomously by towns. Those who pay the taxes have a voice. That theme definitely emerged in the responses. And then just going through it, local definitely seems to mean different things to different people, and the opinions can, you know, they vary kind of widely of whether or not they feel local is good or not. Some, you know, some people, one person wrote that this is a red herring. Local control cannot meaningfully exist. You know, basic costs are imposed by, you know, legislation, and curriculum is set by state and national standards. So, you know, so there was that. And then there was also a real strong sense that, you know, local and specifically in my town is very important. A lot of people wrote about, a school in their town being local and being important.
Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead, Rebecca.
Kevin, did you want to go? I can.
Go ahead. I'm okay if you want to take it.
Oh, okay. Sure. So we had the question, what in our current systems would you like to see improved? And we had several themes come up. So the first one was support a diversity of learners. Also, so looking at making sure that looking at providing additional support, supporting larger class sizes for greater interaction. And the next theme was providing more social emotional learning, providing support for behavioral issues and more mental health support for teachers and students. Also, more support for teachers in the classroom working with students. The next one was upkeep of the physical building itself. There was concern over MAUSD's building and also a concern that for more modern facilities. The next major theme was that there should be greater efficiency at the central or district offices and boards. They want to see more transparency and direct dialogue with voters, more communication, more family engagement. The next one was that students should have more personal learning opportunities and classes should support all types of learners. So maybe more AP classes, world languages, theater arts, drama, project-based learning at all levels of learning, maybe even more better coordination with the Hannaford Career Center. There was also a theme of small schools that let's keep the character, small class size, local control, those sorts of things. Then there's the other side of it, the combining schools, which would lead to more programming, resources, and student support with a wider track for students and that sort of thing. And then lastly, looking at the budget, how much money is spent on classrooms and students and making sure that the funding is going towards that, and advocate maybe more money dollars coming from the state and having more control over our own budget. And that's it.
Thank you.
I can go.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Sorry, was a little bit late. So did we do the taxpayers value yet? No. Okay. So I would say the themes that came out of this question, one, there was a little bit of confusion that you could sense from people's responses, and some people directly said it. Are you talking about taxpayer me or the general taxpayer? So I do want to put that out there. And then I would say when we put it into themes that, obviously it came down to what was great for students and then what was great for cost. And really, I think eventually we settled on that combo being the word value and what people were looking for. But there was a lot of embedded language about local, and there was, a lot of it had to do, and outcomes, I guess, was another thing that showed up a lot. But a lot of people, I would say it was either had to do with cost or really a lot of things that really benefited students, and seeing the outcomes of those was very important. So I think that's generally what it came down to. But I think the question was a little bit tricky, and people did comment on that it was hard to decide their perspective when answering it.
Thank you, Sarah. And we have one more question, right? Yeah.
The person who did the synthesis might not be here. I didn't keep track of of who did what. So I'm happy to speak to the notes that were taken anyway.
Thank you, Tracy.
And highlight that the feedback really reflected that a transparent, well-governed education system was characterized by a lot of communication, communication where people feel heard and respected, and that the communication is accessible, including being online. And there were a lot of words that related to collaboration as well. Perhaps also under communication, financial transparency and audits. So being able to learn about or have that information communicated. There was in the summary notes a sense that a well-governed system is characterized by trust, and that trust comes from a professional foundation with staff and administrators as part of the process of building that foundation and then inviting the community in. And parallel to some of the answers and other questions, a well-governed system would provide for student well-being, not only in terms of their safety, but meeting their needs academically, hitting them where they are, and of course, delivering on student outcomes.
Great, thank you. And that's all we have for the community feedback review, the brief sharing. Is there any discussion that anybody has on that, or anyone like to say anything about that? Kevin, you have to unmute. Yep, perfect.
So I hate to be a negative about this, but the experience in our group, and I think in a few other groups, is there has been on the MAUSD side a lot of controversy and a lot of outspokenness that's generated a lot of negativity with some of the facilities proposals that have been considered or are being under consideration. And it seems like a certain amount of that, I don't know if you want to call it that activity, maybe that's the right word, has spilled over into this engagement activity. And maybe it's totally legitimate, but I'm concerned, as I am being a board member in the MAUSD on the MAUSD school board, if we have reached or can we reach a broad-based input from the community.
Thank you. Becca?
Yeah, I want to comment on that also. I also wonder how many people from Mount Abe's district versus Virgin's district responded to this too, because sometimes I felt like it was coming from Mount Abe's district versus Virgin's, and I just wondered what was the proportion to, and I don't know if that really matters or not, but it just felt weighted, and so I really want to make sure it's proportional and we know where it's coming from in essence, just so that we know where we need to address the concerns and how we address our constituents' concerns to make sure that we're addressing them and understand what they need to know and understand about the merger.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, Mary Kate?
Yeah, I would say also on mine, there were comments not really responsive to the question that just said, I don't support a merger. And these seem discordant with the feedback in terms of what was important. And so I think, it may be that the values of what is important, I think should guide us. But, if things are important, if those values indicate, yeah, we'll have better programming, we'll have, more equity, and the costs will be better. At least those were the ones from my report. Then, by merging, then it seems like, merging is consistent with values, and yet people who express that also expressed, these are the things that are a value of me, but I don't think we should merge. And I think, as Kevin talked about, that may be reflective of some distrust and some and maybe not a full understanding of sort of what merger is, or just being opposed to merger, even if it's better and more consistent with our values. But that's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Anybody else? Erica?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that reading through the responses that I was looking at, I felt the same way, that I was puzzled sometimes, where it seemed like people were saying, I want my elementary school to be in my neighborhood, therefore we shouldn't merge. And to me, I was confused by that, because I think it could equally be true that you get to keep your elementary school in your town only if we do merge, because then we have more resources and we can put them into smaller local schools. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I really feel like I have a very different perspective on what's going on. And so that's a question that I'm really hoping we can address.
Carol?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think there's still a lot of questions in the community that we have kind of failed to address at this point, in exactly the purpose of our committee, which is to explore options and propose a solution, not to force something down the community's throats, which I think is the fear that a lot of people have. So I think we need to be very clear about explaining to the community that our goal is to explore options and make a recommendation based on the data, not to decide what is best for the community on their behalf. Like, we just have to be very, very clear about that.
Thank you, Carol. Sarah?
I just want to echo everything everybody has said. I agree with Kevin that I don't believe it was a diverse sampling of the community. I would be interested to know how much of that was also even some specific towns, or Mount Abe versus Virgins, as far as respondents, not versus, but how many there were. And I also have been confused by there's so much fear about an elementary school thing that there's really been no exploration about what could be on the high school level. And I think we really need to be promoting as much as possible things that could be potentially good. And I agree with Erica, then having the option. I think that there's a way better chance of some of these elementary schools sticking around if we are creative in a lot of ways. And so I don't want to write it off either. I want to explore a bunch of ideas and not assume we're removing control. And also what Carol just said about having, making sure that we're not trying to shove something down people's throats, that we're really exploring some ideas. So thanks. I just want to echo what you guys just said.
Thank you. I think Becca has something to add.
I just had a question. I was reading in the Addison Independent and about the Mount Abe district, and I forget his first name, but his last name was Levinson. And and Mount Abe's district and the exploration that they're doing about consolidation in their district with maybe elementary schools. I was a little confused about how that work. Is it parallel to our work? And I know Erica had brought this up earlier in our work. And I'm just, I guess I want to know like how that is going to impact our work. And is that impacting how the community feels about the merger work we're doing? And maybe this isn't the time to bring it up, and maybe it needs to be talked about at a different meeting. But I mean, when you see that in the newspaper, I just feel like that could impact how people are feeling about our work also.
I don't have that answer. I'll be completely honest. I don't know if Sheila can answer that.
Yeah, Patrick would be able to speak to this in far greater detail, but I can give my short answer, and that is to say whether or not we merge as two districts, we are faced with the realities of declining enrollment each within our own district and need to come up with solutions and plans reflective of our community's ability to pay for our schools, right? So Mount Abe needs to continue on their path forward for budgeting and configurations and so forth, just like Addison Northwest needs to continue on our path. And so it's just informing their work going forward. I don't think either district can hit pause on our work. And so they're just gathering information to inform their board and their work and their budget development and other future considerations. So he could provide more detail, but that's the gist of what that study is all about.
Kevin, do you want to add something to that?
I could give you a very biased opinion if you want me to. So obviously the district has been working maybe 2 years on this issue. And it culminated a year ago when the board had asked Patrick for a proposal. And he made a proposal that took 3 schools and repurposed them. That is a widely debated issue, what that means. But out of the community came a lot of, we can do something better than that. And if you'd give us a chance. So, and oh, by the way, most, if not all this is focused around elementary schools, which is almost a separate path than what, we are considering as a merger. We're, seem to be focusing on high school. But anyway, so the board solicited community proposals, if you will. And there was, I think, 6-ish or something like that. And we retained this guy by the name of Nate Levinson, who is nationally known for his innovative work in schools to evaluate these proposals, which is, we're towards the end of that evaluation process. And I think the article in the Independent, if it's referring to Levinson, is probably talking about that process of evaluating these community proposals for reshaping, again, primarily elementary schools to make things more optimal, if you will. Optimal probably also translates into costs. So I think that was a prelude to the fact that Nate Levinson's finishing up his work in December and will be presenting his options along with of the community options, as well as looking at Patrick's and seeing what the viability or what the pluses and minuses. He's not going to end up making a recommendation, but he'll give us pluses and minuses of each proposal. And out of that, theoretically, will come a discussion that may blend some of that stuff together for a solution. Hopefully that helped you, Becca.
Yeah, and I would just say that some of that material and work that he does may be helpful to us. Like, I think he's evaluating the buildings in the Mount Abe Union School District. So as he does his work, some of it might be useful to us, but it's, as Sheila said, it's a addressing just the Mount Abe Union School District, and Addison Northwest is going through the same process.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on to the process and options for the name of a possible new unified union district. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. I'm going to ask if she would be willing to explain this in detail.
Sure. As you have spent a lot of time understanding the charge of the committee, you've studied governance structures, you've done due diligence in terms of community input, and we're getting to the place where you are beginning to model and draft articles for your selected governance structure. Not that you've chosen it, but you've identified one to model for consideration and evaluation in relation, or as it compares to the status quo. And it will be hard to escape the need for a name as you move forward. And I just wanted to be sure that you had a brief opportunity to at least start a conversation about a process for deciding what name you might like to use, and thinking about input and any other considerations that might be helpful going forward. And any discussion that you have tonight would help the co-chairs and I support you with that process going forward.
Anyone have any comments, ideas to pass forward, or something you've been thinking about and already know? Nobody? Oh, Sarah.
I'm not sure how Virgins did their name because it didn't change a whole lot, but when we did our naming, it actually went to the board once it formed. What was challenging, I think, about that was that it was just another sort of task we needed to do after the fact. However, I do think we settled on something that was a better fit than maybe what we had been, because we were often confused with you all. And then the other piece, though, was within all of our articles and everything. It had our old name, and then so I think that part was a little bit tricky as far as keeping it straight about what it was. Those were my, I guess, only thing I remember.
And what were you before? I think maybe some people may not know what you were before you unified.
Addison Northeast.
Right. Just so that everybody is aware of that. And you changed to MAUSD, correct? That's what the change was. Yep. Okay. Erica.
So then that brings up a question for me. If we come up with a name in this committee, can we consider it like a working name and then put in the articles that the board will get to pick a final official name?
I don't know that answer. Tracy, do you know?
I think that by the time you finish the articles, you should have identified a name that you feel good about and think that there is a good chance that a new entity, if formed, could live with. I am 90% certain that that new entity could change its name, but it becomes difficult to change your legal name in all of the forming documents. You know, it would be just like renaming, you know, your small business, and so it's procedurally challenging to update. Not out of the question, but I think procedurally difficult. So if the closer you can come to a name that you feel could be a solid representation of a new entity, the better it would be for that entity.
Sarah?
Oh, sorry, I would let Dustin go. The other thing I would just add is that it's also an opportunity. It's a really rebranding and something that we could use to our advantage if we opted to go for a merger. So that I think we would want to use it to our advantage.
Dustin? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree with Sarah that it's a good opportunity to, we could get some community input, and, it's a branding opportunity, to, I would just call it Addison North School District, but maybe we come up with a few, several names to put on a ballot and get some community input on what name they like or would like to be a possibility for a possible merged school district. I remember going through a process like this when we became MAUSD. I remember there being several names, and we had a survey. And
did the kids get involved? I feel pretty strongly this is a good one for kids to get involved in, but.
Well, I think so. I think we got pretty wide. I wasn't part of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Whatever committee created MAUSD, but I remember when all of our school districts merged, and we going from a unified union school district to a single school district and became MAUSD. I can't remember some of the names that were proposed, but I remember there was several names, and there was input sought, and there was survey data collected, and then there was an announcement of this is what we're going to call it. And then after it was a done deal, there was, they came up with, the color scheme and new logos and sort of a new brand. The websites changed, and that obviously would all come after, a vote if we were to become a new district. But I guess it sounds like we kind of have to know what the name's going to be before it appears on a ballot that people vote on.
Yep. Mary Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there that, we, with the sports teams, we do have a combined name, MAV, it's Mount Abe Virgins, but the ones that are combined, and that might be an idea. I do think getting the community involved, though, is important. I think, the name is one piece. It sounds like we don't need to figure out, the logo and the colors and all of that right away. And that, I think, it is a bigger piece for having kids involved.
Anyone have anything else to add or any thoughts that are coming to mind? Oh, Erica.
This is just me as a Ferrisburg resident, responding to Mary Kate's description. I feel like this is a good opportunity to acknowledge that it's not just Virgins. The high school is in Virgins, the middle school is in Virgins, but we all come from surrounding areas too. So it would, and I that's one thing I admire about the Mount Abe is there's no town of Mount Abe. So their district belongs to all those towns. And so it'd be nice if we could figure out something that ties us all together too. And Addison North is, adequate for that, but it's a little boring.
Thank you. Anyone else have any? Oh, Kevin.
So I'm thinking this new district, if we go ahead with it, would span from the mountains to the lake. And even though there is a Vermont, or there's a public television network with that name, but Mountain Lake might be in the running. Mountain Lake Unified School District.
We gotta write that down. Mountain Lake Unified School District, MAUSD. Just had to see how it looked. Anyone else with any comments or thoughts? Okay, I'm not sure how we will have a break, but we're gonna have a brief break if you want. If you don't, one thing about the break is I know that we can't have any one-on-one conversations, correct? Is that right? Yeah. If we want to forego the break, I'm fine with that. I don't know how everybody else is feeling. But if people want to, okay, I'm gonna just do a quick, if you want to forego the break and just move on with the agenda, maybe we'll get out 5 minutes early. All right, and if you do need to go, obviously you're in your own home, you can just turn off and go. Okay, so we're gonna forego the break and moving right into the articles of agreement, the preliminary approval of. I don't know if everybody has had the option to look at them, but I am going to be turning this over to Tracy and she will explain some key points of this.
Okay. I just want to begin by thanking you for your discussion about the name and tell you that that will really help me to work with the co-chairs and the two superintendents, and we can weave in some processes for you to continue that piece. As I said a little bit earlier this evening, you've done a lot of work so far setting the context for considering change. You've studied the scope of the authority of the committee. You've studied governance options. You listened to your community and clarified your own values, and are really honing in on some key considerations for committee decision making. And you selected a governance structure to model that you can then, once it's created, compare its projected future with the future of your status quo of your current state. So we've gotten to the point in the process where it's time to create the model, and that means creating the articles of agreement for that model. So tonight, my hope is to move you a little farther along with those articles of agreement. I want to start with sharing some information around context that will help you consider possible articles related to property, debt, and special funds. And I have drafted some articles that can serve as a starting point for your consideration for the required articles related to those areas. Want to remind you that the list of articles that you need to address is framed in statute in 16 VSA section 706B. And so that serves as our outline and gives us the information or the doorways when we want to choose to add additional articles as well, which is where some of those items that I mentioned when I was talking about the work plan came from. Want to be clear that I think the process is to start with a draft of an article, but also give the committee plenty of time to discuss, to make revisions, and for those revisions to come back to you so that you can give preliminary approval to articles and then move on and frame additional articles until you've completed that process. That said, you can come back and revise articles after if you get new information, if you make a decision that suggests you want to circle back and change something early on. So really, it's a draft all the way through, but hopefully the committee will take action to give preliminary approval to articles so that you can create some robust shape to what you're proposing. Do hope that we can get through as much as possible before town meeting so that you can use that as an opportunity if you'd like to get additional community input. So we'll just do as much as we can between now and then, and we'll do as much as we can tonight and pick up where we left off at the next meeting. So I want to start with context and some background information that can support you in understanding the implications of the articles and anticipating some questions that community members might have with regard to whatever decisions you make around proposed articles around property and special funds. So attached in the agenda is a document called, and it's both districts, and it's called Property Values. Did I not attach this in the agenda? I attached it in the meeting minutes or in the email. Okay. So we'll make sure that this document is linked in the minutes going forward. So folks who might not have access to it right now can take a look at it. Committee members, you all have a copy already. So the document starts with just some contextual information about equalized pupil counts and 2020 census data. And I included that as contextual information for you, as it's sometimes useful if you're thinking about what's fair. And of course, there are always many ways to look at what's fair, as I know you all know, but equalized pupil counts and census total population are two ways or two frames that you might evaluate fairness. And the equalized pupils counts reflect that in a merged entity, the proportion of students from Addison Northwest would be roughly about 40% of the equalized pupil count in a new entity. And MAUSD, I got an extra letter in there, would reflects about 60%. I'm rounding in my speech to a 40-60 split because it's kind of parallel to the proportion of adults or total citizens in the census rather in the 2020 census, which is listed down below. That information, by the way, will come back again. We'll need to look at census population when you think about options for the structure of a board for your future district. So this will come back again to you. But again, it's roughly a 40-60 split. Before I move on, any questions about equalized pupil counts or 2020 census? Kevin?
I shouldn't probably bring this up, but with the draft articles, we've got in there noted that Lincoln could join this new unified district, but with these per pupil counts, Lincoln would be included in those counts, if I understand that right.
Well, that is a great item to point out, and we should think about how you want to handle that. Lincoln hasn't been formed yet, and I haven't gotten an update on the status of Lincoln's move to separate in quite a while. Kevin, do you or does anyone, Mary Kate, have an update on that that might be helpful to think about that?
Well, the next step is for the other towns to vote, and that won't happen till town meeting day. So I don't think there'll be any update until then. I'm wondering if this Tracy, is a question for the education commission or board in terms of, given where Lincoln's at, how do we best proceed with that?
I'm happy to follow up with the agency, do you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. I guess we can't go to the, I mean, the board will ultimately decide, but maybe, I forget her name, but the attorney at the agency is really good.
Yeah.
Donna Savage.
Donna Russo Savage, yes.
Russo Savage, yeah, thanks.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and I'm happy to follow up with her. I have a to-do list somewhere next to me. And I will follow up with her. Okay, any other questions or comments on that section? Okay, so the next sections relate to long-term debt, capital funds, and capital needs. And in this context, when I'm talking about capital, I'm talking about facilities. I spent quite a bit of time synthesizing information from the finance teams in both current districts. And my short summary of what I found, which is articulated with some detail here in this information, is that both districts, or each district, has a unique approach to how it is addressing allocating funds and making expenditures to maintain the facilities in their districts. And even though they are approaching it differently, each is approaching it differently, the investments, the combined annual investments, whether it's paying debt or paying directly for improvements or significant maintenance to the property, are very proportionate. Both are spending similar amounts and have similar future facilities expenses to address. You're just using two different approaches to fund those facilities needs. Addison Northwest has a performance bond where they borrowed significant funds to address, I'm assuming, a wide range of facilities needs, and are paying back that bond to account for the cost of those facilities investments. And MAUSD, it's my understanding, has sought bond funding in the past and did not get community approval or electorate approval for that bond funding. And alternatively is allocating 1.1 million to a capital fund to address those long-term capital needs. So it's very similar in terms of the large amounts, and it's just a different pathway to pay for those items. So the information on the document summarizes Addison Northwest's long-term debt based on the FY21 audit. So that information is there. And you can see that Addison Northwest also has several capital improvement funds. Some of them must have been funds that existed before the district merged, and those remain dedicated funds to the purpose that they were originally authorized for. So for example, Virgin's Union Elementary School has about $58,000 in a capital fund, and that money would be used only to address that elementary school. And so then there's also a small capital improvement fund for the new school district, which is about 650,000, and then some other specific school capital improvement funds. Looking to the future and the potential use of those allocated funds, Addison Northwest has a facility stewardship plan, which outlines facilities and capital needs, the larger purchases, and for large equipment needs going out 20 years, which is very impressive. Good job, team at Addison Northwest. And this table summarizes the specific estimated, they're not actual, they're not bid, they're just estimated costs for facilities needs going forward. MAUSD, as I mentioned earlier, has significantly less debt, and again is allocating funds annually in the local budget. From the FY21 audit, the long-term debt amounts payable are listed in the document, and but you can see that MAUSD has more money set aside in the capital improvement fund, just over 900,000 going into this fiscal year, and a budgeted line item addition to that amount of 1.1 million. It's reasonable to expect that they would continue to allocate similar amounts going forward. And the capital needs of MAUSD are roughly, for the next 5 years, the largest projects are listed in the table in the next section on the document. Want to be clear that some of these are tentative and haven't necessarily been authorized yet, but these are items that are on the radar for facilities upgrades in the near future. The total of those projects was just over 6 million for the next 5 years. And they also provided me with a list of smaller projects for the same time period that total almost another million. Again, with those annual investment, both districts are comparable. The needs are similar and proportionate. They just seem to be different approaches to how to fund the capital improvements and maintenance needed. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on that. I may not be able to answer them, but we could at least identify the questions that we might need to get additional information from Patrick, Sheila, or other members of the administrative team. All right, seeing no, oh, Kevin, did you have a question?
Yeah,
or comment?
I got, so somehow I got the impression reading this that Virgins, when they went for that, their last bond for a service contract, that didn't go before the voters. Did I miss something there?
It was before my time, but I'm certain it went to the voters.
Yeah, any bond needs to go to the voters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And it's just a nit, but the last sentence in the MAUSD paragraph that says MAUSD also reuses resources from a general education reserve fund for capital needs. I don't believe that is accurate.
I will check that, but I believe that was what was shared with me.
Okay, my understanding, and again, this is just my view, but I believe there is a general education fund, but I believe it can only be used for educational purposes, not capital.
Sarah?
I can clarify that a little bit because we have a line item that's in our budget that's either $1 million or right over. And then we also have a capital improvement that we put money into from the fund balance. And then we use that to pay for, like, we're doing a lobby project and a couple other things. And so some of it is coming from that and some of it's coming from our normal like line item that's in our budget. And I had a question about is the Virgens, like how things are funded, is that for stuff that's already occurred, or versus I kind of think the Mount Abe one is like stuff that is occurring, or sort of more of a future look. And so I'm just wondering if that perspective is embedded in these numbers, if I'm right in that assumption.
Yeah, so the performance contract was work that already happened, whereas the capital funds are for work that will occur. It's a set aside for needed repairs and so forth. So not sure if that's more like what you have in your 1.1 million. Everybody's moving around on the Zoom screen.
Yeah,
I'm trying to follow Sarah. She's like, did that answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, sorry, I was switching locations.
Erica has a question or a comment.
Yeah, I have a question because this kind of thing is very confusing to me. So I guess I don't really understand the difference. Like here, what my impression is that what this is showing me is that Mount Abe incorporates this capital fund into their annual budget that people vote on as a line item. Whereas our district wants to borrow a bond and have the voters vote whether the school should borrow that money for capital expenses.
Yes.
So we did borrow the money. That's and then we do have a capital reserve when we have a surplus in any given year that we've established a reserve and we can, fund that up to a certain percentage of our budget with approval.
So you pay back the
bond we're already paying on, so that's incorporated in our budget every year, our loan payments, so to speak, right? And then we also save money in a capital reserve for future needed repairs, because the performance contract didn't take care of all of our facility needs. We continue to have new or ongoing needs as well.
So there's part of our budget that is the same method as what they're doing at Mount Abe. Thank you.
Dustin or Sarah, I don't know. Dustin?
Well, just a question to check my own understanding. It's sort of related. I guess my understanding has been between the two different methods is that if you use bonds that you pay back with interest to address facilities needs, and that doesn't count against your pure pupil spending, the bond payments. But when you're doing it from your operating budget annually that taxpayers vote on, that does count against your pure pupil spending. So the advantage with the bond, the disadvantage with the bond is you're paying some interest, but the advantage is it's not counting on the pure pupil spending, so you can spend more on student learning. Is my understanding of that accurate? Maybe Tracy or Sheila can clarify that for me.
I know that some bond repayment is excluded from the excess spending penalty calculation, but I would need to look it up to speak confidently about that. So I'd be happy to get you some more information on that for the next meeting, if that would be helpful.
I can also add that our debt service credit is what's keeping us below the penalty threshold right now. So it has made a difference.
So I just imagine that's a big reason for, if you have really expensive facility needs that, if you're gonna go about addressing it through the operating budget every year, you're gonna really limit what you can spend on student learning. So sometimes the bond, as in my personal finances, I avoid financing anything at all costs, but I can understand in these circumstances, the way schools are paid for, not wanting that, it being very limiting to what you can spend on student learning when you have a big facilities need that's expensive. Bonds may be the only way.
Yeah, I also feel like, construction costs aren't going to go down in the future, right? So the extent to which you can, through in an efficient way, take care of a lot of projects at the same time, and then just pay down on it, it's probably cheaper in the long run, right? Because bringing construction crews on site, and even if you can get them, and it's a pricey way to do it.
Sarah?
I would also add that it didn't work twice, so that's why we've done the technique we've done, and have actually chipped away pretty substantially at a lot of things with the $1 million every year. But last night we had our financial meeting, one of them for our budget, and we actually talked about the capital improvement, that might actually be not included in the either cost per pupil, or that what we're doing with that $1 million might be removed from it. And so that they're kind of looking at that at the state level right now. And so I do think, while it might have been more negative, it might actually be a benefit. And so just to maybe keep an open mind until we have more information.
Okay. So we'll keep our eyes on developments and facilities, and I will work to get some more information about how that plays out in the excess spending penalty, excess spending penalty process. And perhaps we can get a little more information from Patrick around the overall evaluation of the facilities and the long-term needs. And actually that might need to wait until Nate Levinson has done his work, but then maybe this committee can look at that work as well. That would probably be the right time to do that. Okay, so last piece of contextual data has to do with property values. I was able to get for Addison Northwest the FY22 insured values for each building. We're still working with the insurance company to get the actual insured values for the schools and MAUSD. So with Floyd, we took the FY16 property values, insured property values, which we had from the last, from the time when MAUSD was formed. And then we just inflated them by, we picked a number, 3% annually. Don't know if that's too high or too low, but to give you an idea of what those values might be today, that's what we did. And I will update those with the actual current FY21 insured values as soon as we can get that from the insurance company. But I just think it's interesting to note the 60-40-ness of the roughly 60-40-ness of the property values. Of course, that's with Lincoln included. And so Kevin's question earlier about how we handle or think about Lincoln in our analyses of what the contributions are and how we figure out the articles still needs to stay in the forefront of our thinking. So any questions about property values? Okay. So with that context, I drafted and shared with you, and again, we can link these in the middle with comments. Can you give me a thumbs up? Were you able to see the comments? Okay, good. Drafted for you with comments, articles of agreement. In some ways, these are the easier articles for us to think about. And these relate largely to property capital needs and those dedicated funds. I wanted to start out by letting you know that after your early action to identify or give preliminary approval to articles related to necessary and advisable districts, I did do what I told you I would do, which is share articles as we approve them with the agency so that their legal team can review them. And they did suggest a little clarification to the language in Article 2. So I have suggested a change to that the Lincoln School District, if formed, is advisable to join the new Unified Union School District. And of course, this Article 1 and Article 2 and throughout this is where name jumps out as a relevant consideration. So just as a working name, I have called it the new Unified Union Supervisory District and deleted the word school because supervisory district is the one where we are one and your supervisory union, your central office services are a part of the overall budget and system of operations in the single district. So that is the thinking on Articles 1 and 2 for now is just a little clarification and a name change to a clearer working name. Any questions on those? Is there?
Becca has
Yes.
one.
Yes.
So Article 2, can you, the advisable, can you define advisable to me?
Sure.
How you're using, the context you're using that in?
The word advisable in this context comes explicitly from the law in 706B, which requires the study committee to identify the districts that have to be, that are necessary, essential, and must both vote yes to in order for the new entity to be formed. Advisable districts are districts that have the option to join if they want, if the district is formed. So if Lincoln withdraws and gets all the way through that process, and again, the process is unclear and murky, and we're seeing some funny variables as they're trying to work through it in other settings. But if Lincoln was already its own entity, this is essentially saying, if we vote yes and form, and you vote yes, you're in. And if you vote no, and we form the new unified union, and you vote no, you're out. They're still on their own. So I don't know if I'm making it clear. I feel like I'm rambling, so.
Yeah, I still think I'm unclear, but I'll think about it some more.
Is it like saying they're invited,
Yes,
but they're not required for it to occur?
right. So is there any interest in taking action to say you're okay with the revisions? In Articles 1 and Article 2?
I would move to say yes.
Second.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If that was an
Okay.
official motion.
Oh, yeah, no, we have a motion on the floor to approve the suggested changes to Articles 1 and 2 of the Articles of Agreement. Is there any discussion?
I mean, we can still go back and edit it, and if we make a real name, then we'll change it again.
Okay, is everybody, anyone in favor? All those in favor of the suggested changes to Articles 1 and 2, please put your thumbs up. Anyone oppose? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you
Can
so
I
much.
just make,
Sure.
I don't know, can we call these things draft articles?
Yeah, preliminary approval or draft. Right? I think,
I will label the document draft before we share it, before we link it in the minutes. Okay. All right, Article 3, you essentially framed by identifying that you wanted to model a unified union supervisory district at your last meeting on December 6th. Unified union serves students in grades pre-K 12. So that's what this draft language says. The new Unified Union Supervisory District will operate grades pre-K through 12 to provide public education to students in the district. Any questions about that one? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to Article 4, which is the cost and location of proposed new schools. As I may have mentioned earlier, it's my understanding that there are no new school buildings or major renovations that are necessary for the formation of the new district. So that's what this article says. But you may want some additional information about the capital needs in each district. So if you do, let me know, and I can work with Sheila and Pat to get you that. But again, my understanding is that capital needs would not be directly related to the formation of the new entity and would be improvements that you want to make regardless of whether or not you're merged. Keith?
Just a quick question. Does this include any sort of retrofitting or changing of buildings to meet possible shifting populations of students? Did that make sense?
Yes, it made sense. And I would have to say that I defer to the committee as to whether or not you feel like that is a significant expense that needs to be addressed and articulated in the articles. Just to give you a higher altitude view, the list of articles that we need to address is applicable to all kinds of governance structures. So some of them are not necessarily a good fit for us. And this might be one of them. This article was probably useful in the 60s when Union high schools were being built for the first time, and the formation of a new governing entity went along with the building of a new school. If you had major renovations, however, that you felt needed to be a part of this, the articles, we should consider addressing it.
Mary Kate has her hand up. You?
Yeah, I think that there's some questions in the community about the condition of the schools and what they need. And so I think it would be helpful to get a report on that before taking action on this item. And I believe that the Levinson report will provide some of that information.
Does,
Sarah? Oh, whoops. Go, Dustin.
I'm sorry, I jumped in or other people had their
No,
hand
that's
up.
okay.
I was just gonna ask, is this article required to be included? 'Cause it just seems like having it there could be, I mean, can you really know like what might come in, that, you know, something might, there could be a flood and a building needs to be majorly renovated. It might not necessarily have to do with the formation of the new school district, but the timing could be such that, oh, we can't use this building right now. We need to majorly renovate it. And we just became a new school district and we can't because of this article. I don't know. That's what my mind goes to. I just don't know if it has to be included.
Sarah's got her hand up. A couple people do. We'll go with Sarah first.
I was just gonna say that we don't need it to occur, so I think we can leave the article written as is, but it would be more explanatory to have the background information, like a couple of ideas, I guess, or what Mary Kay was saying. And the other piece is that since these articles are about the governance structure primarily, that we don't actually know if we're putting 5th through 8th grade somewhere and 9th through 12th grade somewhere, or that doesn't have to be written into the articles. We might choose to, but we don't have to. We probably won't. We'll probably make suggestions, but that might require that after those decisions are made. And I think we could be holding people sort of without a lot of option if we say this is what you have to do in this article. So I think less is more is probably a better approach.
Thank you, Sarah.
can-
Erica? Oh.
Oh, well, for this article, I was just going to say it doesn't seem like it necessarily is saying there can't be construction or anything like that. It's just saying it's not necessary in order for the merger to go ahead. But actually, my comment was on Article 3, but I don't know if this is the right time to go back to that one. I'll defer to the chair or the facilitator if you want to
I'm
wait.
fine. I mean, you brought it up. I'm fine with.
Okay.
I mean, Kevin has something to say. Maybe we should go to Kevin and if he's talking on the topic or no. Okay, go ahead.
Keep going.
So I was just going to say that looking back at the when Addison Northwest, became a unified school district, in theirs, I kind of liked the way that it was worded to say it will offer education to students in pre-K through grade 12. The unified district is committed to providing its students with an equal educational opportunity. And maybe I'm preconditioned by being assigned the question in the outreach about equity, but I really liked having that language in there. And I just wanted to see what the rest of the committee, if you guys would feel supportive of including something along those lines in ours as well.
Would it help if I actually added that? They might not have the Addison Northwest articles in front of them. So for a future meeting, I could add that as a suggestion, and then you could discuss it as a whole. And that is worthy and was a nice thing. So I'm happy to do that for you. I also will tell you that I will follow up with the agency and see if we have to include Article 4 and get clarification on whether or not that in any way, shape, or form limits the future board from renovations or remodeling in alignment with whatever educational decisions they make going forward.
Thank you. Kevin.
So I just want to align, or just, it's been said several times, but I don't have a problem with this article, and it's pretty innocuous. And I think I think the intent is not to limit continued operational aspects or anything like that. I do think that on the side, we need to, there's a couple of perspectives out there that we need to be mindful of and somehow educate, maybe that's a communicate, is in the Virgins district, it seems to be that the mindset is Mount Abe is in shambles. And in the Mount Abe district, it's like Virgins is burdened with bond debt. And you know, those two things are uninformed at best. And I believe we need to be mindful of that and know Mount Abe is not a leftover of the homeless park up in Burlington that just got run down. And you know, Virgins has a very prudent bond load.
Becca?
I was just going to say what Kevin was going to say. I think in Virgin's area that the physical building of Mount Abe has been, you know, that's what we hear about bond votes not being voted for, and we voted for our bond votes and we take care of our school. Like that's a huge deal in the Virgins, the ANWSD community. And that's what I hear over and over and over again when the merger comes up. Well, they don't take care of their schools because they don't vote for the bonds, and we do. And so, you know, so I think that's a very big sticking point in our community. So I think that there has to be some education around that. Like they have been taking care of it through these measures. And so I think I get that article is there and maybe it's outdated, but I think that's a huge sticking point in our community. So I think we have to address that and be very transparent about that.
I agree. That is something that is said often. You know, that's one of the biggest things that's brought up all the time. I'm not sure if the Addison, I don't know if a paper covered it that way or but yeah, it is something that we should really be educating the public about.
And I'll throw in, even the Mount Abe community doesn't understand the condition of the building. Say nothing about somebody looking in from the outside.
I also want to just add in that there are huge politics related to those votes about leadership. So it's a very loaded topic, I guess.
So we'll let that one sit for a while. I'll do some outreach to the agency and see if it needs to be there. It sounds like it might be okay to have it there with the committee, but that we need to do quite a bit of community outreach and education. And we will build that on the Levinson report when that becomes available to us, which should give us a better picture of the core facilities needs. All right, I have direction on Article 4. I just put in the draft articles placeholders for additional articles that will come back. And so I'm going to jump down to Article 6, which is the next one that I have drafted. And that speaks to debt. And the draft article says that the new district shall assume all capital debt of the forming districts, including both principal and interest, as may exist on the close of business on whatever date we ultimately specify in the article pertaining to date. I think that for a unified union school district, this is probably the only option for handling debt. It's not, you know, in a different governance structure, such as a union high school structure, you might allocate a portion of the debt, or there might be some payments between fiscal entities, but when you join together as one fiscal entity, you will share the responsibility of any decisions that you make prior to it, to the formation of the district. So there really isn't, I don't see an alternative to other than transferring all the debt. questions or feedback on that one?
Sarah?
I don't mean to talk so much. I apologize. I'm looking at the two articles now from the other districts, and they seem a little more involved. Did we have to have more than what is written right there, or is it good enough?
I defer to you on that.
It was divided into like capital debt, operating fund surpluses and deficits, specified funds, transfer of debt and funds. And I don't know. I'm just throwing
All
that.
right. So we're just on the capital debt. There's a separate article 6B proposed for surplus and deficit. So we're going to get you there.
Never mind. I apologize.
Are you interested in preliminary approval of this article? 6A on debt.
Are you looking for a motion?
That would be lovely. It would give me
So moved.
affirmation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to give approval for the article on what article is that?
6A.
6A. Yeah, okay, I didn't want to. On Article 6A, is there any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you. Article 6B speaks to surpluses and deficits and is completely copied from the language in both of your 2016 Unified Union Agreements, your articles. They both said the same thing. And so this is a restatement of that and basically just says that all surpluses and deficits of the forming districts shall, and the reserve funds identified for specific purposes will be transferred to the new district and will be used for the said purpose unless otherwise determined through an appropriate legal process. So for example, you know, we talked a little bit about the Virgins Elementary Capital Fund and the 50 some odd thousand that was there. If for some reason that was not desired to be used specifically for that building, there could be a legal process for making sure that that's okay to do, such as, and I haven't done the legal review, but such as a vote of the electorate. You know, a scholarship fund is still going to be used as a scholarship fund. That's basically what that says. Oops, endowments are coming up next. Sorry, scholarships come up next. Any other questions on surpluses and deficits being transferred? If not, I would welcome preliminary approval.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval of the debts, surplus debts. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Article 6 is endowments, special funds, and restricted accounts. That's where the scholarship funds come into play. And the article, again, matches the language that both districts had before in 2016 and transfers those accounts to the new entity and says that they will be used according to their specified conditions. You could add a phrase like you have in surpluses and deficits, you know, something unless otherwise determined through an appropriate legal process if you wanted. But that's totally up to you.
Is there any reason not to add it?
Mary
And why
Kate?
not?
Yeah, it's probably just superfluous. If there's a legal process that can change that, then the board can go through that process. But I don't have any opposition to adding it, but typically, unless, if you dedicate funds for something through some covenants or agreement, that's what it's going to be used for, unless that entity isn't there anymore. Or I think in Moncton we had something for musical instruments for kids, and so there's all that sort of stuff, and it continues to be used for that purpose, unless that there's no music program, or but I think that people who donated to that want it to be used for the purpose they donated it.
Yeah. The one scenario I could envision, if someday the unification happens and you decide to restructure your middle and high schools and have a single high school and a single middle school, if you have scholarship funds that the endowment or the fund says this is for a Virgins Union High School grad, and Virgins Union High School doesn't exist anymore, the board would just have to grapple with how to deal with that, and whether it's any graduate of the new entity, or is it graduates from specific towns in the new entity. That's the kind of thing that might someday need to be addressed. And it all would depend on the language that goes with the establishment of the fund.
Erica?
Yeah, I think it's very much not up to us. It's really the establishment of the fund. And I know from working with the University Foundation that there are funds that just simply can't be used anymore because of the way they were set up. The entities that they were used to fund don't exist. So there's just money sitting in the bank that can never be used. So unfortunately, that's a problem, but it can't hurt, I think, to add that clause to this sub article.
I'd like to move that we approve Article 6C with the added clause that we've discussed.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve 6C with the added information. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries.
Just point of order, was that a motion to add to the clause or a motion to pass the clause?
A motion to approve Article 6. I wrote it down briefly, but
See, as amended.
as amended, with the added information, 6C.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so in the next 6 minutes or less, I want to take a look at Article 7A, which is the transfer of real and personal property. And that language again matches the prior languages from each entity in 2016. The date is to be determined when we get to that article. I can't think of alternatives to this language. Again, in situations like way back when Virgins Union Elementary School was formed, there were different governance and financial structures. So property transfers in that situation may have looked different, but for a unified union, I think the only option is to transfer all of the property to the new entity for the sum of $1. And with that goes all of the encumbrances of record. So that's what I think 7A probably should say.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to move for adoption of 7A in the Articles of Agreement. Is there any discussion? Do you see that Erica has a hand up?
I feel like I'm dominating the meeting, but I am also following along on, the Act 46. And I just want to point out that this is the article in that in document that also addresses a whole lot of paragraphs about that our intention is not to close small schools. And since this is such a, important topic in our public comment, I just want to be sure that we are going to address this somewhere or come back to this article and have more explicit language about that at some point.
Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Could I just say that we do have school closure on the agenda to talk about in January, I think.
All those in favor say aye or thumbs up. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you so much. I will not tackle 7B tonight, but would ask that you peruse it between now and the next meeting. By way of context, I would emphasize the comment for that section, which is about disposal or sale of property, which is different in law than decisions about how you use schools, including whether or not you use them for educational purposes. So this section isn't about school closure necessarily. The committee ultimately could come back and add or articulate specific examples about ceasing to use schools for educational purposes. But again, that is distinct and separate from sale of property, which has its own statutory process and framework for consideration. So that's the context for 7B. And with that, I'm happy to stop talking about articles tonight, and we'll work on some more for you for next time.
All right, thank you, Tracy. That was a lot of information and a lot of action that we took. Communication key points.
I can start by saying that I heard that I have a note somewhere that in the meeting brief, it would be important to communicate something on the discussion about values, but I can't find that note, my handwritten note, so maybe somebody else remembers or has other points you want to bring up, and I'll look at my notes.
We reviewed key points from the community, feedback from the community engagement event.
Thank you, Keith.
We talked about why it might be useful to have a forming name.
I found my note. There was discussion about clarifying that the committee was making a recommendation. The committee does not decide whether or not you merge. It's the electorate that will make that decision. Is that something you want to reiterate in this?
Yes.
I'm seeing head nodding. Okay.
Becca?
I also think that we still need to have a lot of education of the community around what we're doing, to make sure that they're really informed about a lot of the information surrounding the stuff we've been talking about, such as, especially, I think things came up about the physical building and about budgets and how money is being used to support building maintenance and that sort of thing.
I think backing up, we can meld with Tracy's comment about the fact that we are not determining, we are basically arranging for voter approval, that we started working on articles of agreement for voter approval. Or worked further on them. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
We're also waiting to hear on the Levinson study about options for MAUSD facilities.
Anything else? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to public comment. If there is anyone in the public that would like to comment, you can raise your hand at this time. And it appears that we don't have anyone that would like to speak in the public comment, but thank you for attending. We appreciate it. And it looks like that is all we have on our agenda this evening. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. All
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Happy holidays and see you next year. Thank you.
Next year. Thanks.
Yep.